Chapter 20. Another meeting, another lead. It was a long and tense evening waiting for Dennis to return. As midnight passed, Harry suggested that Lydia should go to bed. "No, you don't, Harry Potter," said Ginny. "I had too much of that rubbish when I was around her age, and I'm not going to allow it in my house." "I was just—" Harry protested. "Well, don't," Ginny proclaimed, but nudged him playfully a few seconds later. Time continued to shuffle along. By 1 o'clock, Lydia was asleep, curled up in an armchair in the corner of the kitchen, an empty hot chocolate mug on the floor beside her chair. Hermione was resting her head on Ron's shoulder. Ginny was resolutely awake as a matter of principle. Ron and Harry were talking in low voices, recounting some of the cases they had tackled as Aurors, to Ambrose and Draco. While he listened, Ambrose's hands were weaving bracelets out of some multicoloured cord Ginny had found. His hands seemed to work independently from the rest of him. From time to time, he would ask for explanations of the magical terms they used. By 3 o'clock in the morning, Ginny was asleep, with her head on Harry's lap. Draco had gone up to bed at least an hour before. Harry had begun resting his eyes a quarter of an hour earlier, but still occasionally managed to look up. Ron was explaining Weasley's wizard wheezes, but kept losing his thread and was starting to repeat himself. Ambrose had run out of cord, but had quite a substantial pile of bracelets on the table in front of him. There were enough for everyone in the house, and their children, plus a few spares just in case. About 3:20 there came the faintest whisper of a pop, followed by muted footfalls from the hallway. "Hello, Dennis," Ambrose called softly. "We are all still assembled in the kitchen, apart from Professor Malfoy, whom I shall rouse and invite to join us." Dennis walked in as the others began to stir themselves. "Were you the only one still awake, Ambrose?" Dennis smiled. "It could have been anyone apparating in the hall." "Well, indeed, you were someone," Ambrose replied. "You were, well, you." "I meant it could have been someone unsavoury." "I refer you to my previous answer," Ambrose smiled. "I was confident it would be you because Lydia said you would be all right." Dennis grinned and shook his head as Ambrose left the kitchen to go upstairs for Draco. By the time the two of them returned, everyone was sitting at the table. The lamps were bright again, and Ginny had provided a new round of refreshments. "Ah, splendid," Ambrose said. "Second supper. Or perhaps first breakfast. Exactly what I needed." "How can you possibly be hungry all the time?" Lydia protested. "I have not eaten for 2 days, young lady," he explained. "If you count today and tomorrow, as I do." "I think you did actually have a sandwich a few minutes after midnight," Ron noted. "A mere trifle, dear boy. Though, if there is any trifle. But I digress. We need to hear from the illustrious Mr. Creevy." "Thank you," said Dennis, taking a mug of tea and a cheese and bacon scone. "It went astonishingly well. That's why I'm so late. I spoke to Samantha Selwyn, as Lydia had said." "She has a soft spot for Blaise Zabini," Lydia said. "She certainly has," Dennis agreed. "Which is the other reason I'm so late, but more of that later." Keep it clean, Dennis. Mixed company and everything," Ron warned. "Actually, I meant it brought up more memories I had to make sure Zabini had when I went back to him. Thanks to Ginny for teaching me how to do that, by the way," Dennis said. "In fact, it was a close call. I just managed to get away before I started turning back into me. I think that polyjuice is starting to fade." "So what did you find out, Dennis?" Harry asked. "Okay, the meeting started out like the last one. There were a lot of different faces there. It looks like they're definitely getting the word about. The refreshments weren't so bad either. I don't think Renfield has great taste in food. The Selwyns did much better. Anyway, I offered my assistance to the cause via Samantha Selwyn, and I was invited to stay behind after the meeting. Incidentally, Ginny, Bloom was there, and he was every bit as gormless as he was last week when you were playing him." Ginny glared at him. "I'm just saying what a good job you did." "I will remember this, Creevy," she hissed, and she smiled. "Go on, Dennis," said Harry. Right, it turns out that there's another layer to all this. As we know it, the idea was to unite the wizarding world against the Muggles, by frightening everyone with the idea of Muggles turning themselves magical. Yeah, a bit of an odd idea, that one, Ron said. Well, the other level to it, Dennis resumed, is that since your friend Glanford, was it? Granville, Ambrose corrected him. Since he was successful with his experiments, they've decided to actually try to turn Muggles magical. Even though they already have magical children that they've pretended were Muggles, Harry asked. It seems now they're looking at a longer game. They want to take Muggle youngsters, make them magical using the rituals that Granville got to work, then raise them as a kind of future army against the Muggles, or anyone else who opposes them. I guess that Aloria did have Granville's notes, Ambrose. Anyway, the theory is that the first generation will be especially powerful. If that theory is correct, and the accounts that Draco has shown me seem to suggest it is, said Ambrose, we can also expect Lydia to be unusually powerful. Yes, I guess so, Dennis admitted. This is based on the writings from thousands of years ago, you said, didn't you, Draco? So it may not be right, or it may have been mistranslated. It's a common thread in a lot of the legends of the first High Magicians, Draco announced. It may have some truth to it, but then again, legendary events do tend to get exaggerated. But if they're going to convert and raise an army, Hermione ventured, that is going to take years, surely. Exactly, Dennis confirmed. Probably another 5 or 10 years. What about the Ron frowned. The current crop of magical childrens they've brought up to think we're Muggles. As far as I could make out, Dennis said, they'll be brought out in a trickle, one at a time, to suggest that Muggles are experimenting with the technology. They want to build up the fear gradually, to make sure it spreads. There's also some kind of plan to drive a wedge between the ordinary Muggles and their leaders. That way, when the army of young super wizards and witches is ready to attack the Muggle leaders, then the majority of Muggles should be willing to side with the wizarding world. Well, it's pretty fiendish and a bit complicated, said Harry. But it's probably a better idea than the original plan. If they can get these rituals to work, they'll have some real power behind them. Didn't the rituals to do all this die with Granville? Said Ron, sounding perplexed. I strongly suspected that everything poor Granville did was followed in minute detail by Aloria Rakison, Ambrose sighed. What Dennis has told us seems to bear that out. Possibly everything he wrote, every note he made, was copied straight to her, presumably by some magical jiggery-pokery. A pair of notebooks and a protean charm would do that, Hermione clarified. All these plans seem to be based on taking children away from their natural lives and their families. There's absolutely no regard for any of them. It's inhuman. Sadly, being inhuman is something at which humans are all too adept, Ambrose pointed out to her. I've been, or rather, Zabini has been invited to join in their first attempt at this ritual, next Saturday, Dennis informed them. So they must already have some poor Muggle child lined up for this, said Hermione, clearly horrified. We have to save whoever it is. What we need to do is find Aloria and stop the whole plan, said Harry. That way we can save all the children involved. Harry, we can't let them, Hermione protested. We're not going to let them do anything we can stop, Hermione, Ron explained in a forceful tone. But for now, we don't know who the child is, who has them, or where they're keeping them. Hermione, Harry said. They won't harm the child. They need it, him or her, on their side. We'll prevent the ritual from happening, rescue the child, and get one of them to tell us how to get to Aloria. Luckily, I still have some Veritaserum left if it comes to that, Dennis chipped in. Luckily, Harry said, I went temporarily deaf and didn't hear any mention of illegal potions. Veritaserum is a truth potion, Ambrose told Lydia, who was looking traumatized to have been woken in the middle of the night to hear all this. How did you know that? Ron asked. Quite apart from the fact I could conceivably have worked it out from the name, Ambrose explained. and I've actually done rather a lot of reading over the past few days." "Are you all right, Lydia?" Ginny asked. I'm okay. I just need to go to bed, I think." Ambrose yawned and stretched. "Come along, then. I shall come up with you. It has been a long evening." As soon as they were in the hallway, up the steps from the kitchen, Ambrose kneeled down and took Lydia's hands in his. "Littlest Lydia, you will soon be home with your mum. Then you will be going to Hogwarts, with Draco and Hagrid and Neville and all the other professors, who will teach you how to use and control your magic. But no matter how unusually strong or not it may be, you will be in the best hands there are. I've read a lot about Hogwarts recently. In the main, their professors are some of the very finest witches and wizards. You will be all right. Now, let us away to our beds." Lydia sighed, then smiled. "Thank you, Uncle Ambrose. I know you're not tired. I can go up on my own. You stay, and you can tell me about it in the morning." Ambrose cut his head on one side and smiled at her. "You are a thoughtful and adaptable young lady, Lydia. I have always been deeply impressed by your intellect, your goodness, and your humour. To find how strong, capable, and courageous you are is simply astonishing and humbling." Lydia hugged him. "If you ever need anything, let me know," he told her. "I will never judge you unless you ask me to. I will always do what I can to help you." She leaned back from the hug and grinned at him. "I do need a puppy, and probably a pony too, or a unicorn." "Short answer, no," her uncle said. "What's the long answer?" she frowned. "No." She giggled. "Away to your bed now. Good night." "Good night," she yawned. As Ambrose returned to the kitchen, Dennis was speaking. "So if we can keep the element of surprise, we should be able to handle them, no problem." Harry turned to Ambrose. "Dennis was saying there'll only be a handful of them involved in the ritual. He has a potion which will get us in without them noticing that we shouldn't be there." "Snoop juice," Dennis said. "Or something like that. I haven't really decided on the name. It doesn't make you invisible. It just makes people not bothered about who you are." "Tincture of indifference, perhaps," Ambrose suggested. "Whatever," Harry interjected. "Ron and I, Dennis and Ginny, Draco and Hermione, we should be able to take them on quite comfortably, especially with the element of surprise. You and Lydia should hardly know we've gone." Ambrose frowned. "I think we should come with you." He waited a few moments for the protests to die down. "Let me explain," he resumed. "Lydia seems to be having powerful and useful insights. That may be a great help. Additionally, if there is a young child, then he or she will be more willing to come with us if we have another child included in our party. While you are busy overpowering these miscreants, I'm sure I can be of assistance with certain things, such as ensuring we outnumber them. Or if you need a distraction, I can step out and say, 'Look at me, a big old muggle in the midst of your arcane shenanigans.' Thus, the two of us are virtually indispensable." Harry scowled. "I'm not happy with this." "Good," Ambrose nodded. "It's decided then. We all go." Silence fell across the table, which persisted for several seconds. "Was there mention of bacon sandwiches?" Ambrose asked. "Or did I dream it?" "You must have dreamt it," Ginny pronounced with more than a hint of finality. "Ah, such a sweet dream it was," Ambrose reminisced. "Perhaps dreams come true in the morning light. Until then, we all need sleep, lest we become delusional with fatigue. I trust we will see you soon, Dennis." "Absolutely," Dennis nodded as he went to the hall to disapparate. The others said their farewells and good nights, then slipped away to their various rooms.